Well, hi again, everyone. Welcome to Unanchored Boston with Bob Lobel. I'm Mike Lynch. And as always, we're brought to you by Cold Springs RV, your destination for all things camping. And where? We're in New Hampshire, of course, and the great George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota, the big wheel at 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. And we are thrilled today to have a dear old friend of both Bob and myself. When you talk amateur basketball or any type of basketball, this guy's name is right at the top of the list, the great Leo Papile. And Bob Lobel has to do the formal introduction, Leo. I would do it. Otherwise, I'd tell all about Paul Campbell and myself refereeing all those Quincy Chiefs games. But Lobel's going to handle the intro.
Yeah, well, Leo, you hired Lynchy to referee those games. There must be a reason why you paid him so much money, that you guys must have had a real good operation going there, the Quincy Chiefs. But listen, I'll just say this. If there's anything, he's a living and breathing basketball encyclopedia, okay? That's Leo Papile, among many other things. But so many things. Patrick Ewing, Dana Barrows, Ramil Robinson, Chris Herron, all these guys are part of your resume. Rick Patino, Dean Smith, all these guys, all these basketball guys are so much a part of your resume. And I guess I'd have to start off, and this is an amazing week, Leo, in Boston, as you know, turning to the NBA with the Celtics and the Mavericks. Everybody is talking about what's going to happen on Thursday. So I should open up with saying, with your experience in with the high school kids and the college kids and the NBA, what are your feelings about this week going into the Celtics Mavericks game? Because that's all anybody's really talking about.
Well, I'll preface it by saying, Lynchy, you're forgetting we started out referencing the old trade school at Somerville Trade doing the JV games, and you were over at Harvard. You'd sneak over and you'd get that $15, and then.
Oh, Lynchy, it's unbelievable, Lynchy. You're unbelievable.
Yeah, you're a man for all seasons, but I appreciate both you guys, and being with two guys. I'm a fan of history, and there's no two bigger guys that are identifiable with sports history since the turn of the century, right into the quarter century almost of 2-0, and it's just an honor, and I appreciate you guys and the invitation. So let's preface it with that. As far as this series, the NBA has evolved over the years, and I think when we go to our past, and my first experience with an NBA final was '62, when Frank Selvey missed a wide open shot. Russell got the rebound, fell to his knees, went in overtime. Boston wins Game 7. Back then, the game was pretty much pivoted, no pun intended on the pivot. If you had a big guy you could throw the ball into, you were going to be really, really good. And everybody built their roster and their championship hopes around finding that elusive, George Mikan, Will Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Lou Alcindor / Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, individuals like that you could throw the ball into. And when you threw the ball into that guy, significant things would happen in a positive fashion for your franchise. Decade-long contender, decade-long dominance. And as the game evolved and where it is today with these two teams, with the terms we call pace, with the extraordinary influence of the three-point shot, series like this are difficult to handicap because, I know, Bob, both you guys got a golf background. Sometimes when the wind's blowing, the ball's not going to go just like you planned. And we're both teams, if you look at the extraordinary amount of three-point attempts that both teams do, they lead the league in three-point attempts. They will win or lose depending on whether they're at 33%, 29%, 38%. Anything over that is considered we can't lose. So much of this series will be determined by the long ball. Boston at times puts 5 guys on the floor that can make a shot from the three-point line. If their big guy gets back in it, they've had an extraordinary success without him, Porzingis. He also is a three-point threat. We go back to last spring when there were a lot of weeping and gnashing of teeth when Boston had a seemingly insurmountable lead over Miami. And in the last 2 games of the series, Game 6 and 7, I think they shot 16 for 67 from 3. That's always a possibility when you live and die by the long ball, as opposed to going back a generation ago. If Kareem gets 40, we get beat. if we can keep Kareem out of the paint and hold his field goal attempts down, we can win. The game has evolved now so much, and these two particular teams are the poster boys for the three-point look. You know, it's fair to say, off his numbers, without being a booster for an MVP or anything like that, Doncic is the most influential player in the game right now because of the amount of time the ball is in his hands, and the productivity he has with the ball in his hands is historical. So the old NBA adage was that the guy that's got the best player wins. Well, I don't know who the best player is, but he's extremely influential because the ball resides in his hands. And you see he's a walking triple-double. There haven't been a whole lot of those guys. And he plays the point guard position, or the lead guard, as they call it now. Point guards have kind of gone extinct. But, you know, he's 6'6". He looks like he's could play in the NFL with his body. You could hit him with a chair, he wouldn't budge. He's strong as a bull. His range is unlimited. So when you have a factor like that, it's for a coaching staff, it's head scratching time. You're up 20 hours a day trying to figure how do we limit his dominance? Not eliminate it. That's not going to happen. But how do we limit his dominance? You know, with the basketball. I think at this point, home court and that stuff. You know, I remember being with the Celtics 16 years and worrying about a seemingly meaningless regular season game. We got to get home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs. Sort of learned over the years that is a little overrated. I wouldn't say insignificant, but I would weigh it toward insignificance. You know, these guys are true pros. There's a lot of buzz. Well, the people are going to yell at Irving and this and that. That may happen, but I don't think it impacts performance. You know, there's plenty of rest here, maybe too much because of the TV arrangements, the games are going on for television contract on the main network. So, you know, both these teams have had too much rest, in my opinion. Now, how that impacts you, you know, Boston getting Porzingis back, you know, Dallas has been healthy. You know, Hardaway was struggling a little bit with a couple of injuries. Kleber was, but those aren't significant guys in their rotation. The thing, I'll say this, Bob, to answer, it'll be a 6 or 7 game series. If I had to pick who was going to win, I'd say I don't know. It's 50.1 to 49.9. You know, for true relevancy, I still do stuff in the league with the Clippers the last 10 years, more or less a senior advisor. That's what you do in the NBA when you're a long-time front office guy. You kind of go off to die somewhere obscurely in a front office. So I know that one thing, being the Clippers, the Western Conference is for real. And the Clips lost, you know, of course, with the asterisk, no Leonard, lost a tough series to Dallas in round 1 after winning the Pacific Division. So Dallas has knocked off 3 teams seeded ahead of them. They were a 5 seed and 3 teams in the West. What happened in Dallas is in February, they made a couple of moves that no one really jumped up and down about and said they were going to be good or bad, but they added P.J. Washington. In fact, they did that for ex-Celtic Grant Williams that had gotten a payday in Dallas and things weren't working out. P.J. Washington has been an enormous addition to them. He's playing big minutes, and they also went out and got Daniel Gafford, who, again, a guy that had bounced around a little bit. He's splitting time with a second-year kid, Derek Lively, in the post. And I know when we played them, Clippers played them, their athleticism up front was a real factor defensively and around the rim. You know, Boston's the skilled team of this generation, but no one would confuse Boston with an overly athletic bunch. The Mavericks certainly are, particularly up front with P.J. Washington, Gafford, Lively, and they got a journeyman, the Jones kid, who's bounced around, minimum salary guy. I think this is his 4th or 5th team in the last 4 or 5 years. And Derek Jones Jr. was 1 year and out at UNLV, played in the minor leagues. Those 4 guys up front, combined with the really formidable backcourt, have made this Dallas team. You can't do any analysis on Dallas at all until after the trade deadline when they basically made these 2 additions. I don't think a lot of times when you're a front office guy, you like to pat yourself on the back. I know those guys. I don't think they're telling anybody, well, we knew P.J. Washington would do this. We knew Gafford would do that. You sort of make those nondescript moves and hope they'll add a little bit. Well, they've added a whole lot. They've beaten, winning in Denver, knocking the defending champs out. That's not an easy task for anybody. Altitude, defending champs, the dominant player in the game, and Jokic. This team's to be taken seriously. Boston, on the other hand, 64 wins. Got a 7-4 guy who can play, who missed a whole bunch of games. They didn't turn ahead. They've been dominant. You may make an argument the fact that the Eastern Conference was not the most formidable competition, but hey, you got to play the games. They've won the 12 games in the East. They had to win, won them handily, and the Indiana series, they had games that could have gone either way, but the bottom line is they won them. So this is a very interesting series, coupled with, I'd say, unprecedented time off. But not only Boston, but the Mavs been off for a while now too. I don't have the exact days in front of me, but I have no idea how this is going to go. Someone could come out of here 2-0 with 2 blowouts. It could come out of here 1-1 with a couple of overtime games.
Everybody here, the uninitiated with the West, will say, "Well, we've got 5 guys that can always score. Dallas only has 2. We'll give them their 70 points between them. We'll take our chances right there." That's a huge mistake.
Dangerous. That's Russian roulette, because what happens is when a guy of that caliber, of both guys in their backcourt get going like that, and it's a close game, you're going to rue the day that they got those 70, because now they're on a roll. And I don't think they always use that term. Lynch, you're right. We're going to give it to them. It probably means less double teaming, less blitzing. The defensive scheme is more team oriented, if you know what I mean, other than loading up on 2 guys. And the way the rules are too in the NBA, as far as the zone and all that stuff, it only can go so far within the rules. To play like in college, where you can play a box and 1, or you can play a passive 2-3 zone and things of that nature. They allow a bit of a zone and things like that. So it's a bit of a misnomer, and people do say it all the time. Well, they're going to get their 75 or 80 or 70, and the rest of them are going to shut down. That's easier said than done, and sometimes that's foolhardy. I agree.
Leo, let me think and ask you one thing that I don't think you touched on: the coaches, the difference between the 2 coaches for the Celtics and Dallas, and your thoughts about what kind of a difference those coaches make, or in fact make around the league. What kind of a difference does coaching make?
Tremendous amount. And in basketball, haven't done it in a long time, it's game management. Coaching now has, if you look back again, being historical like all 3 of us are, Red sat there with a trainer in the 60s. Now you have 3 guys making around $1 million that are your bench assistants. Then you have 12, they look like they're in a choir, guys in the same costume to sit behind the bench. 12 of them. Every team has 12. They're usually young bucks right out of MIT and things like that, and they get all these calculators going and this and that. I don't really know what they do, but coaching and game management, let's get to it. I know both of these guys as players, as kids, having competed against them in our 47 years of the BABC. Jay Kidd is a clever guy, was a very, very clever player, and is a very, very clever human being. He is really good at, in a positive way, manipulating relationships. Obviously, I'm not going to be a critic here, but Kyrie has had ups and downs in terms of adjusting in some of his locales. I think that's a fair way to say it.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, Kidd has been a guy that has done it all, seen it all. And as far as a game manager, which may include, instead of running, 4 down or 5 across a certain play for a guy, game management includes how, you get a guy and you whisper in his ear the night before the game, look, here's what we're going to do. Here's what I'm going to say. You get guys aboard. Kidd, because of his experience as a player at a very high level, he's been on USA Olympic teams, national teams. He's walked with kings. And again, the old days, you could out X and O guys. So coaching and game management today is so different. And people say it's the players' egos. No, all these guys want to win, but there's so much noise and outside factors. Kid checks all the boxes. That's why the Mavs brought him in. He had a couple of other places he was at where things didn't end well. A lot of people were surprised when he got in there, when they made a change with the GM, when Nelly left, or Nelly was forced out, Don Nelson Jr. Kid has, been able to navigate the situation, whereas Doncic and Irving have been since first grade. You guys all played pickup. They're the guy that always had the ball in their hands. A lot of people said this cannot work. Last year, they made the late trade. Irving got over there. Didn't work out well. They sort of forfeited their way out of the playoffs. They had a chance of being in the play-in. They kind of laid down and said, okay, we're going to start over in training camp September. He's done a masterful job getting those guys together. If you look at their combined numbers and the camaraderie they show for one another, it would be like having two court. It goes back to the Patriot quarter when Brady come around, when the other guy got hurt, and all of a sudden, we're going to have two quarterbacks, and who's going to play? It's not easy to get two guys with that ability and have them coexist and then have enormous success. So to answer, Kid has checked all the boxes, and he certainly is as prepared to win a championship. And again, I'm from the school of the Hubie Browns, the Dick Motters, the Jim O'Briens at Boston, the guys who were the X and O masters, the guy that could beat you on the pick and roll, defend the pick and roll, all that stuff. Today, with this wide influence on the three-point shot, this thing called pace, it's like we're at the racetrack. They talk about pace. These guys have adjusted to that. But the X and O influence is at an all-time low in the NBA, because what you do now during a timeout, you look to those 12 characters with the computers and say, okay, what's working? As opposed to Red getting his clipboard or a piece of paper and writing down, all right, Lynchy, you screen from Lobel. I'll come off it. Give me a handoff. You run to the rim, Lynchy, like your dad would. Bounce past Lynchy, layup, we win. It doesn't work like that anymore.
He makes it. He has to make it first, Leo.
Well, Lynchy will know the ball fake and create the contact and get the foul just in case he wouldn't. He was well taught. His father was one of the all-time great high school coaches in Massachusetts. So Lynchy learned fundamentals. So now we go to Joey Mazzulla. A little emotional because his dad was a good friend, passed away in the COVID era. Dad and I go back to the 70s. His brother Justin played here at BABC for us, played in Vermont. He's now working for Ainge out at Utah. I've known Joe since he's a baby, because of my relationship with his late dad. Joe's done an enormous, he's coming a long way. I remember getting a call from him about 6 or 7 years ago, and he was helping out at a D2 in West Virginia, and he was looking to get married. He was making about under 20 grand. He make a call over to the Celtics, and maybe I can get me something up in Maine, on the AAA team up in May with the G League team, and made that call, and the rest of it is sort of worked out. He came in under different circumstances when a coach was forced to resign basically right before they're getting ready for training camp. So, he had to learn the game management part. Joe could X and O with the best of them. He was a very clever player. I remember sitting one time in a Celtic office when Ainge and the crew in NCAA tournament, we don't go to the games because there's so many of them and they don't give you media passes. So you got to struggle for tickets. We watched the games on TV, and Kentucky was playing West Virginia in the Eastern Regional Final. Kentucky was loaded with a couple of lottery picks. I think it was Gilchrist and Cousins, and I joked before it. I said, Joey Mazzulla is playing now. He's averaging 8 points a game, 6 assists, 6 rebounds. Looks like a fighter, like from a movie. But he looked like he could have played the Robert De Niro role in Raging Bull. Like, Joe's a tough kid, tough with his hands, as they used to say. Joey used to be called. And all of a sudden, Joey gets out. They beat Kentucky, beat Cal, and Joey got MVP of the regional. Now, being a longtime NBA personnel guy, we were pretty much past Joey as an NBA prospect. Yet he get that team across the finish line into the end zone to a Final Four for Bob Huggins at West Virginia. That tells you who Joe is. He doesn't back down. He's tough. He's quiet. And what he doesn't know, he'll figure out, or he'll ask someone who knows. He's humble. He's got these guys' confidence. These guys believe in him. And once again, he has the assets of the 21st century. Mike Zarin over there is a wizard, one of my favorite guys in basketball. People don't mention him. I know Brad does a great job, and the ownership group does a great job. Mike Zarin is the man behind the curtain over there with all the technology and all the input he gives his coaching staff from his analytics experience and expertise. I always say about Mike Zarin, if I was going to the electric chair tomorrow, Lynchy, and I said goodbye to my wife or girl and kids, I'd want to spend my last few hours with Mike Zarin. He's that entertaining an individual. The Boston media doesn't really know a whole lot about him, but a lot of the success over there, and Brad will tell you himself, and I'm sure the front office would, is Mike. And I know Joe relies on Mike for a lot of technical advice. And Joe is a worker, just like he was as a player. We'd call him a journeyman. At Swampscott High, Lynchy, he would have been a three-sport guy. He would have been an offensive guard and a linebacker. He would have been a catcher in baseball. You get where I'm going.
Yeah.
He would have hit the sacrifice bunt. He might get hit intentionally by a pinch now and then. As a linebacker, he'd come in and take somebody's head off from a blitz. Joe he's every man. Coming out of Johnston, Rhode Island. His dad, Danny, again, a dear friend, God rest his soul, brought him up the old-fashioned way. If Joe caused a problem, Danny probably slap him. So Danny was a big guy, and like an NFL tight end build and all that stuff. But, Joe's a great New England story. Kid's an iconic player. So I think if I was a guy like Shawnee says, somebody looking to write a story, I'd get my pen out and write the life and times of the two coaches, because it's really a contrast. Kid being the Hall of Fame player, top 50, top 75, and Joe was a grunt who fought through a couple of headaches at West Virginia, got him to historic Final Four his senior year, and then was coaching at a junior college in an NAIA and a D2, and being an assistant up in the G League, and at a very young age got a lifetime opportunity. I think it's fair to say, and Joe would tell you himself, if it wasn't that situation where the coach was removed in Boston or resigned, whatever you want to call it, Joe would, he probably wouldn't be sitting here now. There's a long line. There's only 30 NBA jobs. There's a long, long line that all of us get in if we want to go in that business. In college, there's 360 Division I's. There's a long line there to be a head coach, assistant, AD, whatever your choice is. But in the NBA, the line is just as long. There's only 30 opportunities. So Joe came in at a very opportune time. And I credit Brad, who had been a coach, seeing that potential in him. Because, again, not to slight Joe, I'll tell you himself, if he was in that line, he was far, far back in it. But look at his one-loss record. They've advanced in the playoffs. And I think the guy he's the man for the job. So there's no real advantage in the coaching situation, but I think it's a great question and a phenomenal story adjunct to this series.
So what's the difference between Joe Mazzulla last year as opposed to this year? What's the difference in him as a coach?
Another 82 games, and they have a core. They haven't, they made the addition of Holiday this year, who's a very plug-in and win guy because he's older, been on a national team, won a gold medal, won a championship. But for the most part, their lineup has been 80% plus intact. So add the 82 games, add the intact lineup, 80% plus. So that can only make you better just by osmosis, by being around it, looking at the losses, learning your guys' strengths and weaknesses, both on the court and off the court. One thing I learned about this game at a very young age, so much of, we all can see, as scouts, okay, his left hand is good, his right hand is bad. He can shoot the long ball. He can't shoot the long ball. Can guard bigs, but can't guard switches. All that stuff you can figure out in 5 minutes. You got to figure out who you're living with, because in the NBA, for 9 months, you're doing one of three things every day. You're practicing with your group, you're playing games with your group, or you're traveling with your group. So what I say is Joe's had an extra year to learn his peers, learn his players, learn how they live, how they sleep, how they eat, what's going on in their lives, what's going on at home. Because, basketball is 2 hours a day. You're bouncing the ball. There's 22 other hours a day, like in all our lives, where we have issues. And as a coach, if you know that certain things impact certain players at certain times for certain unique personal situations, you can only get better. So the longevity of Joe's term, and they're winning 64 games, makes him much more impactful than last year. Because everybody was ready to jump off the Tobin Bridge, and they lost Miami up here. They didn't shoot the ball well. Miami did. We already covered that. Joe got over that in 10 seconds, but he continued to learn his guys. And the only way you can have success, you're son of a coach, Mike, like coaches learn people. They learn their players. They learn which buttons to push and when to push them. It's not just an X and O. We're going to run 4 down. We're going to run 5 across. We're going to run floppy. Those are all terms for offensive sets. It's much, much more than that. It's learning who your guys are and what makes them go. And Joe had an extra year to do that.
Leo, you are a walking encyclopedia of basketball. And I'm just going to preface, I'm going to tell you what the next question I'm going to ask you after I need to do this. It's not a real commercial. It's kind of what pays for the show. Well, whatever. Listen, the important point is I want to preface the commercial by telling you what I'm going to ask you afterwards.
You can't ask. I ask.
It's about Patino and Calipari.
Sure.
I'm fascinated. I've always been fascinated about the relationship, about those 2 Italian guys that are car salesmen and basketball coaches and successful at what they did to some degree, and self-destructive at in some cases. But I'll let you talk about what's that.
I said it's fascinating. I'll be happy to add my.
I need to pay the bills first, right, Lynchy? And then Lynchy's got this question for you, Leo, and then we'll get into the meat of the Patino Calipari situation. But then the question that Lynch will have will follow the commercial I give. So shut up, Bob. Just do what you're supposed to do. Campers, are you thinking about a new RV? Campers, yes. All you guys out there, our friends at Cold Springs RV are ready for you. So go see the latest in travel trailers, fifth wheels, motorhomes, pop-ups, and more. They have the best selection, even an indoor heated showroom for pop-ups. Visit Cold Springs RV in Ware, New Hampshire, and check them out online at coldspringsrv.com. Ware, New Hampshire is just west of Goffstown, north of Tingsboro. And that's the end of that until Mike asks you this very important question, Leo. It's a big part of our show here.
All right, Leo, we know that John Madden didn't like to fly, so he drove around in a bus, the Madden Cruiser. Yeah. So Cold Springs RV is in the planning stages of building a Lobel Lynchy cruiser. And since we don't have any money to pay our guests, what we're going to do when this thing, by the way, when this thing gets built, we're going to let our each one of our guests have it to drive cross country. We'll fly you back from the West Coast. You get to drive cross country in the RV, but the one condition is you have to pick somebody to ride shotgun with you across the country. Somebody you'd like to have a conversation with for 6 or 7 days. It can be someone from the past, the present, alive, dead. Who would you want to just have a conversation with riding across country?
Good one.
Sitting shotgun.
Is there a sports?
Doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be
sports.
No.
I'd say I'm a big fan of history, and today being somewhat emotional 80th anniversary of D-Day, FDR.
Wow.
Good one. Wow,
that's a good one. Very good one. We, I think the other
changed the world.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah. I'll save the world, but without getting political, that would be. And I thought about it carefully. That would be awe-inspiring.
Well, that just brings goosebumps to hear that answer. That's great. All right. So I guess Patino and Calipari would not be sitting shotgun with you.
Well, being around sports, most of my stuff was being a number 2 guy, like Boston under Chris Wallace, under Ainge. I like that. A lot of guys like being number 1 guys. Those guys do. I kind of like being conversations right now I'm in our one of our family businesses, Slade's Bar and Grill here in Roxbury, where I'm broadcasting from here. And Bill Russell once owned this. I was a shoe shine boy here as a kid and all that. So everybody knows that history. It's been well written. A lot of guys I'd like to have conversations like here, maybe over a couple of Bud Lights. You know what I'm saying? Our treat. A lot of guys like to be in the front of things, in front of a camera, and enjoy that, putting that makeup on and all that stuff. And, I'm not being critical. Those two guys have always liked the bright lights. And when you want to live in the bright lights and you don't shine, sometimes it can be dark shadows. And Bob kind of prefaced it, both guys are still swinging. Rick's a little older than me, and I'm a senior citizen. Cal's coming up on the rear, yet they're still in high-profile jobs. They've had their ups and downs. But I think the extraordinary need to be in the bright lights is what has always motivated them. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not being critical. But it's pretty clear that those guys love shining on CBS and all that stuff, and now ESPN, which changed that industry. I remember when ESPN first came about, and then Nike started giving coaches money. I said, boy, these guys, I said to Rick one time, I was his assistant at BU actually in the late 70s, in between early pro gigs in the minor leagues, between the EBA and the CBA, when all that was going on. Quincy Chiefs was the EBA, the NBA minor league, unofficially before BU, and then the CBA, they changed the name. I left Rick at BU to go back to be head coach in the CBA. But point was, I remember saying to him, boy, you guys are on the verge of going from wearing free Converse, they ship over from Malden. Now you're wearing $600 Gucci shoes because of two things, TV and the sneaker companies paying you for your brand. So those guys were both, Rick more so at the outset of that, when coaches went from basically phys ed teachers equivalent, which is nothing wrong with that, career high school coaches, making you $30,000, paying your bills, buying a new car every 5 years, maybe putting your kids through state college and all that stuff. And then all of a sudden, as the income options for guys became different, they became brands and they got paid a lot of dough. They both went through the, Kentucky dynasty and both won a single championship there, which immortalizes them in the Bluegrass State. And they've, had ups and downs since there. Cal's pro thing didn't go well. Rick's did okay in New York. And I think in Boston, he decided to leave. And a year later, we're in the conference finals, but he was part of building that. Year after he left, we're lose to the Nets in a historical series. But no one would probably nominate him for the Hall of Fame off his pro performance, trying to be objective. But both guys have bounced around college jobs. Cal makes a lateral move in the SEC to a place that's not as storied legacy program as Kentucky, but at Arkansas, they certainly have had their moments. And the interest is similar. A largely rural state with Chris Wallace, speaking of, we used to call those places nation states, because you'd go up in game day and there'd be a 90-year-old couple decked out in a Kentucky costume or an Arkansas costume. You don't see that here at UMass. No offense to UMass. So those guys have both run the gamut of high-profile jobs, high-profile positions, media darlings. I think that's the difference. You look back at John Wooden, you can get some, or Al Rupp, you can get some grainy film on them. But these guys became household words through the expansion of college basketball through media. And both of them, because of their eccentric personalities at the time, and sometimes it was a particular rough press conference that would get memorialized on social media. And they both had their ups and downs. Rick obviously didn't leave Louisville in good stead, and gets a second chance or a third chance at Iona, and then goes down the street to St. John's. But they both still are kicking and fighting, which is a credit to both of them. They've been well paid in this game. I think if you got them at 5-Star, the old legendary camp up in Pennsylvania, where everybody used to go, and they were counselors. If you told them in like 1980 1985 or 1990 that in 2025, this is how much money you would have made from college coaching, they would have either passed out or said you're crazy. So both those guys have probably benefited more from their brand and image. And they've won a few games along the line, don't get me wrong, but they became characters and brands and well paid for it. And still now is I don't know what's Cal, 65, Bob, 66. He's got to be, right? 64 somewhere.
Right around there. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's mind-boggling to me. I knew them both in previous lives. I remember Cal was coaching a team in 1983. The BABC, our local amateur team that we've had for 47 years. I remember Cal getting out of. He was a grad assistant at Kansas, and one spring in '83, he sprung up with these guys from Buffalo, and he had this group and this and that, and we played him, and he was running up and down the sidelines, jumping around and everything like that. And I said, look at this young buck. He wants to be a college coach someday. So, he's come a long way. And Rick had a unique start in that, Boeheim grabs him on wedding night, assistant at Syracuse. He'd been out at Hawaii as a grad assistant. The whole staff got fired. He's the last man standing. He took that over. Then comes right here to BU. So, they both kind of like cut their teeth here in the Commonwealth, with their first bit of success, Cal at UMass. And, that was his first head job. And Rick, even though he had the interim thing in Hawaii, his first head job at BU. I think Rick started I came with him his second year at BU. Rick started in 78. I think Cal started in 88. But if anyone told any three of us now that we'd be having this conversation and we added up their W-2s over the last 35 years, they would say, you guys are crazy. That can't happen. Look at these two little characters running around with shoes and suits. They're going to come and go just like every other coach, but they became household words, iconic figures. But again, I think they're just players in a bigger game. How social media, how ESPN, how it all exploded. And they were in the right place at the right time. And again, I'm not criticizing either one of their skills, but I happen to think some high school coaches I know were the best coaches I ever knew. They may have not been the same. They made that 30 grand. You know how it works, Lynch. You go in out of Bridgewater State, and you start with the 7th grade team at Swampscott. And then when you're 32, you get bumped up to the 9th grade team. And then when you're 40, you get to the JV team. And then when the guy at 65 retires, when you're 50, you get the keys to the head coach. And at 65, they give you a gold watch and put you in the State High School Coaches Hall of Fame. Those guys didn't take that path. That's the fabric of the American coaching society, what I just described. These guys were able to.
What's the dog's name, Leo?
There's two. They're brothers, Cotton and Cliff. I'll say this. Cotton and Cliff, they're brothers. Yeah, Cotton is well known. You can look him up in the interview. Bob sees him down at our spot where we dine sometimes on Marina Bay. Cotton's my constant companion. Cotton has a historical basketball influence. He's the only canine ever credentialed by the NBA Commissioner's Office. I should have brought it for him. It's simply Cotton basketball dog.
It's like Belichick doing his draft picks, putting his dog up in front of the typewriter.
That's it. As you can see, Cotton, he's looking around. He says he was with his brother. They might have saw there might have been a mouse or something running around here. I don't want to call the health department, but we're in the city. We have good exterminators. They just, that's what they were barking at. But it was a false alarm. So he's up here now. And he's with his older brother. So his older brother's Cliff. But those guys, Bob, when history looks back at late 20th century, early 21st century, the growth of college sports. Now, the college sports industry, it's not like when you were at Harvard, Lynchy. Bob, you're a Kent State guy, right? It's a little bit different now. Everybody's going to get in Division I is going to get a salary, including guys that participated and women back to 2016 with that historical settlement of the antitrust lawsuit with the athletes they had. So players are now professional. They're not just student athletes. But my point is about those guys, when history looks back at their era and they do a documentary, if we're still around in 2100, those two guys will be the face of it. They won a lot of games. They're both enshrined in Springfield, so they get basketball immortality and off their college winning. But if you wanted to be a investigative reporter and go negative, there'd be a lot to write about. So it's really a fascinating story and a great question, Bob.
Let me ask you this, Leo. Has name, image, and likeness trickle down to the amateur level,
yes.
AAU, and what you do? BABC, yes. By the way, for those who are uninitiated, Boston Amateur Basketball Club, 47 years. So name, image, and likeness,
yes,
is now down at your level. We
have a guy. It's his business. Great kid, in-state kid that has one going. It's not a whole lot of big dough from a garment company. His parents hired a representative, which kids are allowed to do. He's got another year of high school, and he's compensated by a garment company. Yeah. I keep it out of our locker room, and he's just another player. He's just number X. But it has, and it's not just with BABC. We got a good bunch this year, ranked in the top 10 in the country. Our league, we switched leagues from the EYBL, which is a Nike venture, to the 3SSB, which is a Adidas last year. But we're top 10 team this year, going into June and July. July's our playoffs, mid-July. It has, Michael, and it's to me, I wish the kids well. The family could use it. It's not what I was brought up on. I just shed a tear. And again, it's not for the opportunities for the kids. And the whole thing right now, in the college game, you got guys. When I go out, I'll scout some games for the Clippers. First thing I do is look at the resume. You got guys playing in their fourth school in 4 years, and they're going to be compensated for it. So from a coaching perspective, your ability to circle the wagons and keep guys in check, and not in a negative way. We all grew up with sports. Right now, the inmates run the asylum, and it's filtered down where, if you're an MIAA kid and you're a skier and some ski company wants to give you, some dough to parade around in their skis, you're not ineligible. It's the courts have ruled, and it's just the beginning. Now, this is the beginning. Don't forget, it's only been around for a couple of years. It's going to be commonplace. And
Lynch, the sportscasters are going to get it, and you and I are going to be over the hill by the time it happens. We're going to miss it.
I'm already over the hill, and I wish I missed it. But you couldn't be more spot on, Bob, with that. It's a different world, and God knows where it goes. But the virtues of sport that we all were raised on have been altered for all eternity going forward, because there'll be players in high school making more off NIL than the coach might make for his annual salary, teacher, coach, whatever you want to be. Let's just leave it like that. I happen to know that for a fact.
Wow. That's incredible. Do you fear that players would jump to another team because their financial inducement might be greater than it might be with your team or another team?
Some of the leagues have rules to prevent that, transfer and things like that, but it's certainly it's happening. Yeah, no question. And again, we're talking high school kids, so that 99.9% of the time the parents are going to make the call. So, and again, you look, if it's a parent or a single parent that this is a life-changing amount of income, you can't blame them. But let's just say this. My goal would be ABC's to get to season 50, which is 2027. I'm glad I'm in season 47, not season 7, because I don't see how anyone could survive at any level, because you have, let's use, and not to slight it, starting point guard at Duke, a 3-year starter, all ACC player. Not probably an NBA guy right yet. I think that's fair to say. Leaves to go somewhere else because his NIL was triple. You're at an institution like Duke, high academic, storied basketball background, but someone else comes knocking, and you have an agent, so it's not tampering, and you leave. So that the legacy, the winning, doesn't matter. I'm not saying the young man made a bad decision. I think 99.9% of us would probably do it if you got a chance to peek at the numbers. But that would be something thought unthinkable to leave a storied institution where you're having success on the court individually and as a team. And you just say, well, sorry, boys, I won't be around for senior night. I'm going over there. You know, it's mind-boggling to me because, again, virtue is a sport we all were raised on, loyalty. But now it's all been trumped by the NIL. And, you know, the courts have ruled. We live within the rule of law. So it's Katie by the door now. I mean, college football, I have obviously inroads in basketball, but the college football stuff is mind-boggling, the numbers you're hearing, you know, for kids to go. And now there's, you know, when we transferred, Lynch, you need sit a year, you know, think about it. You're going to have to sit a year. Now, then they said, okay, you can do that once. And they went litigation with that. You can literally transfer at halftime now. Pretty soon you might see a guy switching jerseys at halftime on ESPN. There's no rules. And, you know, Charlie Baker's a great guy, friend of probably all of us here. And he's got his work cut out for him, just trying to make some semblance of order. Because right now it's the wild, wild west. You know, the way the numbers are being thrown around by these collaboratives and things like that. And initially they said, coaches, you got to kind of look the other way. You can't get involved. And I don't know if coaches were doing that. They weren't. It's not my business. But now they said basically the schools can be involved, you know, in terms of the latest legal update on it. So it's just, you know, one thing I'll throw in there about this. They're talking about with the latest ruling that everybody's got to be compensated in the Power 5. Well, it's Power 4 to Pac-10. Pac-12 doesn't really exist anymore. That players are going to be compensated, and some of the states are thinking about making them employees. Well, you guys have been through strikes in baseball, basketball, hockey, football. Then collective bargaining comes in. So let's just say I'm the agent or collective bargaining representative for the hockey players of the ECAC. And when we're negotiating the stipends that the law now requires you to pay us, I'm going to say, you know, Mike, I got 18 guys over at Harvard hockey team. 6 of them really don't want to go to school. But they're part of our union. They're going to be playing, representing Harvard. Let's just kick around. I know you're in the NCAA, and they say you got to have a certain grade point average. What's the thing they use? Graduation credits every year to stay eligible. We want no part of that. Our union says no. The guys that want to go to school, they can go to school. The guys that don't go to school, then, okay, they don't want to go to school. Let's just start there. We're going on strike. Just like, you know, all the major 4 sports have had those, you know, when they've been lockouts and players stop. That's coming. Trust me. Now, Harvard's probably not a great example because I think the president or whoever the president is or the trustees wouldn't get involved. Let's just say that happens in the SEC. Okay, we have 85 scholarship football players. Okay, here's the agreement, Lynchy. 60 go to school and 25 don't. But they'll still wear the Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Miss State, Oak, Texas. They'll still wear the jersey. So that's the ratio. 85 guys on scholarship. 60 of them will enroll in school and 25 won't. Take it or leave it. Or we're not playing. We're not going to be playing Labor Day on ABC, and you're going to lose your money. Get back to me when you can. That's coming. Trust me on that.
Wow. It's mind-boggling to actually think. Let me ask you this: we're looking at the finals, both rosters right now. Is AAU basketball a mandatory rung in the ladder to get to the NBA?
All it did, Lynchy, you probably played in the Lynn Summer League. I played in the BNBL, Roxbury.
He officiated with his hand out the back for the $15.
Yeah, well, that's the Harvard in him. He was a Harvard guy. We were state college guys. He was ahead of us at that time, Bob. Give him credit.
I know. That's why I hear it all the time.
Where is my partner, Soup Campbell, by the way?
Living Peabody. He still assigns for for certain outfits here and there. His kids are grown. He got a kid who's a big time baseball umpire, and he kind of follows him around. He's Paul's a Somerville guy, or we say Somerville. Greater Boston League guy. I was a Greater Boston League guy. North Quincy, we were in it back then. So I know Paul since we played across the line for each other in a football game in 1968. We were not trying to knock each other's heads off at Doughboy Stadium in Somerville, and known him ever since. He broke his leg in that game in a freak accident. I remember, and of course, he was a guiding light for a lot of us young officials. Lynch, I just got my 50th pin from Ivo. I haven't refed in a while, but I kept sending my checks in, board 27.
Yeah.
But yeah. So this club basketball, travel basketball, it got business. Instead of you going over to play up in Lynn and me going to play over in Roxbury, now these kids go to Vegas, and like we're in the league, 3SSB Adidas League. We played our regular season. We went to 3 sites on weekends. We went to Omaha a weekend in April. Then we went a weekend in April to Birmingham. And then we wrapped up the 3rd session, play 5 games each session. And the last one was in Bryan, Texas, College Station, Texas A&M. So it's just expanding its horizons. So in order to keep up with the Joneses, kids play now year-round at a higher level. Whereas before, getting you guys from Swampscott and going over to play the guys at Lynn, you know what I'm saying? It's just got a bigger stage. You got conglomerates like Adidas and Nike sponsoring it. When they say sponsor it, you don't go to the airport and say, I'm with Adidas and get on a plane. But they'll give you gear, may get some travel stipends, things like that, depending on how you negotiate a contract. But yeah, I think it's the same in hockey, baseball, maybe not football because of the nature of the sport. But, baseball, hockey, and basketball, you have year-round, or I shouldn't say year-round, outside the scholastic season travel. Like we started training camp March 15th. Cotton and I came up from Miami because most of our kids, we have 2 teams, 11th grade team and a combined 9th and 10th grade team, sort of like high school. Of our 16 kids on both teams, 15 are in NEPSAC, private schools. They have their vacations 2 weeks in March, as opposed to the traditional public Catholic schools that have February and April. So we had a 10-day training camp, double sessions each day. So we got 40 hours of practice in because, kids are on boarding school. You can't practice during the week. So it becomes specialized. So without that preparation for kids, it might be fair to say that they'll fall behind on the learning curve. It'll be like if you're in math class and all the other kids got tutors from MIT, and you're sitting there with your grandfather trying to figure out how much is 2 and 2. You know what I'm saying? So to answer your question, I think that, to play at a high level for anyone who's going to play college basketball and to play, our season goes from like roughly March 15th to July 15th, probably play like 40 games, in that period for each team. If you don't do that, it's not saying you won't be able to go on and play in Division 1, 2, or 3. And at our level, it's almost exclusive Division 1 kids, not just BABC, but with our opponents. So if you don't do that, you're going to fall behind at some point. It'll be like the same thing, use the analogy. If you don't play Swampscott, go play the Lynn kids when you first see them. This is different. So now you have the global. Like, what's ironic about us, when we started, Lynch, you remember, I think you covered us. We played the Soviet Union down Don Bosco and all that stuff. Our roster came from 2 places, Boston Public League or the Catholic Conference. All of our 10 guys, 99%. Now here's our starting lineup. 2 bigs, all 6'10", both go to Putnam Science, right over the Mass border from Worcester. You're allowed to have players from within your state or bordering state. They both came from Nigeria in 2022. Our small forward was born in India. Kid probably going to Harvard. Parents born in Jamaica and India. Our 2 guard, who's a big timer. Parents born in Haiti, grew up in Fall River. Our point guard, parents both Harvard medical grads, but born in Nigeria. He's born here. So it's a little different. They're still legal. They're still area kids, but it's no longer Boston English, Catholic Memorial, Don Bosco that we all grew such fond of. As things transitioned to that, it was a little tough on me. But the reality was, if we're going to compete at this level, you got to keep up with the guy next door. And that's just what we did. We have 1 MIAA kid on our 2 teams, Amir Jenkins, who was a 2-year starter at Worcester North, didn't lose a game, but he's leaving Worcester North to go to Worcester Academy for his junior year next year. So that now the entire roster is knapsack kids. You know, Lynch, that the hockey started that back when you were at Harvard. I remember when I was reffing a game over at Buckingham, Brown and Nichols one day, and I said, "Geez, why's the parking lot so crowded?" They said, "You don't know?" I said, "No, there's a kid over here playing today. Every NHL here team is watching him." I forget what prep school he was from, but they were playing at BB&N. Hockey prefaced basketball when it came to the mass exodus from the publics and Catholics to the preps. And for us, like I said, our entire roster is made up of knapsack kids, but they come from, Lowell, Nashua. We don't have a Boston native on our roster right now, city of Boston itself. And like I said, go to the 70s, 80s, 90s, to the turn of the century, it was 99.9%. Occasionally be a Cambridge kid or a Quincy kid or a Brockton kid or a Lynn kid or a Somerville kid, but it was Boston. But now the way this thing is expanded globally, I just gave you our starting lineup. It's a different world. Just like everything we've talked about today, how much things have changed in the last 25 and 50 years in the sporting world. It's global. It's money. It's no longer playing for that trophy. I mean, we play for trophies. We don't get any compensation to win games. And, I'm like your father. I still like to win games. I don't like to lose. So all that stuff is still wholesome. But the outside noise that we face and high school coaches face and travel team coaches face, it's unprecedented. And it's the tip of the iceberg with the financial stuff that just gets presented to these kids and these families on a daily basis.
Leo, let me just circle back, because that's a realistic glimpse of the future, and the future is now. But it's also now because we started this whole week with the Celtics and the Mavericks, but we also prefaced that with the death of Bill Walton.
Yes.
It would be unfair not to even mention him and talk about him, but you think in context of Walton and UCLA and the sixth man coming to the Celtics and in 1986 and all that whole team that goes back to the UCLA John Wooden dynasty and programs, college programs. Maybe there are no such thing as college programs anymore, but the classic ones: UCLA, Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky,
Indiana,
Kansas.
Yep.
What else, Mike? What did you?
Indiana with Bob Knight.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, there are
Absolutely.
programs. I mean, there were moments when one school would excel, but there were programs over a period of years and almost decades. In North Carolina, for instance, that's a program. Duke, that's a program. You know what I'm saying here?
You couldn't have said it better, Bob. You could not have said it better. Let's just talk about live examples. Kentucky will have 12 new players come in this year. Okay, I just overspoke on the situation at Duke. A starter leaving after 3 years, all ACC player, transferring. No trouble, no academic issues, no playing time issues, no nothing. And those days are gone. It's a situation now where all these people, they go on a month. Well, here's the deal. You get guys now, to get them in summer school under the guise of summer school, because summer school is part of the scholarship. And you get them in there playing in the gym. Now you start practice now September 30. And you opening nights now November 5, November 4, the first Monday in November. You get through March, conference, and then there's a thing called the portal. And half the country, 2,000 people in basketball, put their name in the portal, and they're going somewhere else. So you hope, BC, Earl Grant's done a great job. He had a roster last year where 6 of his first 7 should have been coming back. Quentin Post was a fifth-year kid. He graduates. 5 of those guys left. They were starting. They made the NIT. They won some games they weren't supposed to win. You feel for a guy like that, because basically they get outbid. BC is a great place, great education. ACC, great league. You're starting. You won 19, 20 games. You won a game in the NIT. Everybody's back. Guys should be raring to go. You guys been around sports your whole life. Guy's gone. They had of the 6 they expected, 5 are gone elsewhere. And not playing time. It's just from what you hear from reliable sources. Well, they're giving them this. Place just tripled it. See you later. So, Bob, you couldn't have said it better. Those things are memories. The Wooden Dynasty from '65, 64. They won the first one with Paul Hazard and that Keith Erickson, that gang, right through. They won one after Walton in '75 because they got beat in '74. Don't forget the upset, NC State. Walton never lived to. He never lived that one down. God rest his soul. He always talked about how they get beat fair and square. And you look at that. That cannot happen again. The transient nature of college sport. Like I said, you're an NBA guy. You go and you say, okay, let me get up to date on number 6, John Smith. Okay, freshman year Mississippi, sophomore year Ole Miss, junior year Brigham Young, and here he is, his senior year, he's at Arkansas. That is the norm. Now, not so much in the Ivies, Lynchy, because they're like the last bastion, the Ivies and the Patriots of college sport, and I think they always will be, thankfully. But what you just said, Bob, it's the ship has sailed, all those places. It's in the last 4 years, you got to put an asterisk beside it in college basketball because you had the COVID rule where everybody gets 5th year. We had a kid, 5th year kid, who's bounced around school. We say he's an alum. He got a 5th year deal to go to someplace for his 5th year, which normally wouldn't be allowed, but because he was a freshman, and anyone who was on a roster in 2021, even though they had a season, that was a season with no fans, and the season was pushed back a month, and they played a month down at the casino in Connecticut. There were all kinds of games down there, no fans, no scouts. Anybody that was on a football or basketball roster that year gets a 5th year. That kid got almost $1 million to go where he's going for his 5th year. And I'm happy for him and his family. But that being said, that's the name of the game now. It's no longer senior night, everybody's singing the school song, saying what a wonderful young man he was, and chemistry professor loved him, the cheerleaders loved him, and the priest at BC, the Jesuits loved him. That don't matter anymore. It's like, all right, March 15th, we just got beat in the Big 12 tournament. I got my agent on the phone. I'm getting 440 here at Blank Tech. He can get me 600 over here. Bye. I'm going to Portal. And all this, I think I'm glad we're all of us are getting older here on this broadcast, because if you ask me, even if it's illegal, it breaks my heart. I don't care. I think it's the worst thing that ever happened to sport.
Well, Leo, it's been our time is just about up, and I never even got to talk about the Ewing, Chris Herron. I really wanted to talk about him, but maybe that's for a later time. And
round two,
and we certainly had a chance to deal with the Celtics and Mavericks, and quite a great analysis he gave us with the coaches and also the teams and what we can expect, because we can expect possibly anything at this particular point coming
Absolutely.
up. You did
who refereed Pat Ewing's last high school game?
The one against BC High at BU?
Yeah.
Must have been you, Mike.
Joe Mingle and yours truly.
And they moved it upstairs to the hockey rink, if you remember, right?
They moved it upstairs.
Yeah.
And the kids from BC High, because it just came out maybe a month or two before that Ewing was dyslexic. And so the BC High kids are going, "You can't read." They're chanting it. And it was really kind of cruel. And we were on
not in the Jesuit way.
2-on-1 fast break. I'm the lead official. Ewing throws a tomahawk down and continues right in front of the BC High cheering section. He points to the scoreboard. He goes, "Read that, motherfuckers." Read that, pointing to the scoreboard.
Yeah. Johnny Miller was the lead guy at BC High, Revere guy. His dad was a Revere guy who actually played for the Packers. Was a longtime high school coach in the area, Coach St. Mary's of Lynn, John Miller Sr.
Yeah.
I was there. I was on the staff at BU that year. I remember watching it, Lynchy. I was ringside. I think we might have talked at halftime. The legend Joe Mingle. That's historical Ibo 27. Oh, you were 95, right, Lynch?
130.
130. Yeah, that's right. 130. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, no, sure. Hey,
I was just glad to hear the story, to hear you say the F word on
I know. I thought about that because my mother's 92 and she watches occasionally. If she hears that, she is going to kill me.
Mrs. Lynch,
you're quoting.
That is really over the top. I would expect that on the Tom Brady roast, but not here on the Unanchored podcast.
I was quoting Patrick Ewing.
I know what, okay, fine, whatever.
Hey, let me read this quick spot, and we'll let Leo go here.
And I'm really happy I did.
Hey, if you think about a new vehicle, go where Lobel and Lynch go. Go see our good friend George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. Speaking of Lexington, they always had great basketball teams. We have been customers for years because we know George Gray will treat you right. They're a family-owned and operated dealership that we trust and you can trust as well. So go see the big wheel, we call him, the great George Gray at Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. When I think of Lexington, I think of Ronnie Lee and Rolly Massimino. And Wayne Morrison and all kinds of guys they had in that great team.
Paul Cormier went on to a great college coaching, pro coaching career. Great era at Lexington, the old Middlesex League.
Went to UMass. Who's a professor out there, school management. Yes, yeah, great guy.
Yeah, he's out of Arizona State now, I believe. Yeah, Lynchy, that was your nemesis. So the Northeast Conference, the Middlesex League, were Class B in the old Garden Tech tourney. So I know you had your wars. Your dad was out there scouting and all that stuff. I remember those days like it was yesterday.
Yeah, we actually won. We beat Braintree in '68.
I was there, Lynchy. I witnessed it.
One of the great nights.
Jerron roughed everybody up.
He did. Well, listen, Leo, the dogs were great. You were great. Nobody.
And our mutual friend Rich Mahoney wasn't wrong when he said that you are the encyclopedia of basketball at any level, and it was absolutely correct.
At St. Anne's, class of '67. That's when my formal education stopped in 8th grade. I was a habitual truant in high school. The only rule in the Greater Boston League, you had to check in and be on the on the attendance roll. It's 8 a.m. Then I'd go off and run around the barrooms in North Quincy, listen to all the Vietnam vet stories. So my education ended in 8th grade. So I'm happy I'm an authority on something.
Hey, did I buy a life insurance?
When you get a chance.
Did I buy a life insurance policy off of you when I was in college?
Yes, you did. Alan Dalton and I, Celtic draft trade.
Can it possible to change the beneficiary?
Living off that commission, Lynchy, too. We got you pretty good.
Yeah, you did.
And you changed the beneficiary.
Yeah, I'm sure you did a couple of times.
There's still hope.
Well, you're the best. It was a great
show. Thanks so much.
Drinks, everybody.
Drinks
around Marina Bay
right now. Beers on him.
Thanks. Thanks, your daughter, too.
Yeah, she's right here. Thank you, Britt. They say thank you.
All right, folks, make sure you follow us at unanchoredboston.com. Bye-bye.